I'm Jono Buchanan, and what we're going to do in this video is to start working with filters on the output channel. Filters allow us to radically change the tone of a sound. And of course, therefore, if we put a filter on the output stage of our mix, the entire tone of our entire track is going to be affected. This is a really popular DJ technique, and we're going to look at how we can actually do it within the context of a production. Firstly, let's hear the track we're going to be working with. Okay, now in a previous video, what we've done is to work with high-pass filters on individual sounds, on a kick drum and on a bass line, leaving the rest of the production untouched. By putting a filter on the output channel, every single sound within our track is going to pass through this filter, and as a result, we're looking at that sort of similar technique, but on a much grander scale. Let's see how we can get started. So you can see that whenever I select any track within my mix, the individual track mixer is here. And on the right hand side of that, what I have a chance to do is to see the stereo output, the main output for my mix. And that's also, of course, present if I open up the mixer. I'm going to find that over to the right hand side, the stereo out track is here, showing all of the plugins that are currently being used to affect the entire mix. So I can see that there are 4 of those automatically assigned within this project already. But what I want to do is to add a filter, which I'm going to do by coming into the first available slot up here at the top and selecting the AutoFilter. Now that's in my most recently used group of plugins, but if it's not for you, that's fine. The filter menu is here and AutoFilter is at the top. Now, if it just so happens that you don't actually have any effect slots left to put your filtering on, no problem. Remember that what Logic will let you do is always to reach above the currently selected effect slot. You can see as I move here, I can see this little white line, and if I click there, I have a chance to add a plugin above the current one. So I've now added a second AutoFilter as well. And that's fine because I'm going to need 2. I'm going to mute the second one for now, and what I'm going to do is to come to this first one and open it up. So what I've got within the AutoFilter is a few different sections. I've got the main filter section up here in the top left-hand corner. I've got distortion for both the before and after filter stages. So adding drive before the sound is filtered and then after it has been filtered. My overall main output section controlling dry and wet processed sounds. And then what I've got is an envelope and LFO section as well. Now for the sorts of techniques that I want to apply within this track, we're going to keep things really simple. I don't need the envelope or the LFO, and I don't need the distortion section either. We're just going to be focusing on the filter. Now within Logic's AutoFilter, what I have a chance to do firstly is to choose the type of filter that I want to work with. And the one that's currently selected, the 24 dB per octave low pass filter, is the one that I want to work with. This is Logic's most extreme low pass filter. In other words, as I start playing with the cutoff frequency, we're going to hear significant tone changes in terms of the way that this sound is being processed. And we'll hear that really clearly if I just start playing back this section from sort of bar 6 onwards. And if I start playing around with the cutoff frequency, we'll hear the difference in tone. Okay, so what we can hear as we drop the cutoff frequency is that what we're getting is these changes in tone. But because this is a low pass filter, what we're hearing all of the time is bass. So in other words, as I move the cutoff frequency down towards the bottom end, we're still hearing all of the bass frequencies. What we're cutting out is high frequency content. So all of the fizz and all of the top end and all of the sort of sparkle is gone, and we get this kind of very dull sound. It's like being on the other side of a wall from a track. We're getting all of this low frequency content continuing to come through, but we're losing the top end. And so we get this really characteristic effect that we've heard on loads of dance records in the past. And what we can do is to experiment with exactly how we want to sort of have the the movement of that filter change over time. So what I'm going to do this time is to add a little bit of automation. I'm going to just draw a line for the cutoff frequency using my low pass filter. So in order to create automation for this particular filter, what I need to do is to automate the output channel. Remember, this plugin isn't on just one sound, it's on the output track. And to start with, we can see that the output track actually isn't part of my arrangement. So what I need to do is to come and open up the mixer and select latch mode to allow me to draw some automation for the stereo output track itself. And when I do that, I have a chance now to create automation for this plugin in real time. And what I'm going to do is just draw some changes over time to the way that I want the filter to be sort of progressing as this track plays back. Okay, so I've drawn two separate ramps for my automation, and what I want to do is to protect this now by coming into read mode so I don't make any changes by mistake. Now, where can I actually find that automation? Well, let's close the mixer down for a second. What we're going to discover is that Logic has created a track for the stereo output. In order that I can now edit this automation and have access to it to see what I've done, I need to have a track created for me, and Logic's done that the moment I selected to draw automation for the output track. So if I press A to open up the automation, I'm going to see in the background the shape that I've created, and what we can do here is to go and find the used parameter, which is always going to be at the bottom of the list of all of these options here. I can see the auto filter cutoff is here, and when I select it, I can see the shape that I've created. Now this means that I can edit it. You can see if I make this a little bit bigger using Command and down so that I can actually zoom in on this particular this track, what I have a chance to do is to see the shape that I've created. So when the filter is at 100%, effectively we're letting through all of the bass, all of the mid-range, and all of the treble as well. So we're hearing the entire mix. And as it drops, what we're starting to do is to filter out high frequency content, leaving in the low frequency content. Now, I quite like this shape that I produced here, but I think it all happened a bit soon. So what I'm going to do is to simply edit this information by getting rid of some of it. And then what I'm going to do is to draw a slightly different shape here so that we're back in time here for this downbeat. And then later on, where I experimented with a sort of second ramp, that felt a little bit more natural and a little bit better to me. So I'm going to sort of keep that exactly as it is right now. Let's just hear what that shape sounds like. Okay, so that's working nicely. What I've got is this kind of first sort of contoured shape as far as my low pass filter is concerned. Now then, what if I wanted to do exactly the same thing with high pass filtering as well within the same track? Well, clearly the auto filter can either only be a low pass filter or a high pass filter. So if I want to experiment with both techniques at the same time, I'm going to need a second version of the auto filter, and that's why I set up two to start with. So what we can do is we can unbypass this second auto filter, which is in the second slot here. And then what I can do is to come and find the cutoff frequency for the second auto filter. Now here I need to be a little bit careful. I've got two plugins next to each other, both of which are called AutoFilter. It'd be very easy to get this wrong in terms of selecting the wrong plugin. But of course, the thing that's going to make life much easier for me is that in both cases, what I want to do is to change the cutoff frequency. And I can see that the first cutoff frequency is already here, and I can see the shape that I've created for it. So what I'm going to do is to open up the second auto filter, and this time what I'm going to do is to make sure that I've got a high pass filter, which is this shape here selected so that this is the sort of second range of tone control that I can produce for this mix. And then what I'm going to do is to come to the drop-down menu here where it says cut off, showing me the first parameter that I've automated. And what I'm going to do is to look carefully through the list, and I can see that the list of plugins I've got over here on the left-hand side is mirrored in the list of plugins here. I can see that there are 2 auto filters, and then the exciter, and then sub bass, and then the multipressor, and then the limiter. So it's the second auto filter I want, and it's the cutoff frequency here that I want to choose as my parameter. And I'll know I've got this right if when I let go, I can't see automation for it because there isn't any yet. Remember, that first line that we can now see ghosted out in the background relates to the first filter. So in this context, my high pass filter is going to do the opposite of what the low pass filter did. What it did was to let bass content through all of the time, and it varied the amount of high frequencies we could hear. Now what we're going to do is to always have high frequency content, and we're going to vary the amount of bass that we can hear. So in other words, as I adjust the cutoff frequency, what we're going to get now is shaving out the bass end, getting rid of it, carving holes in it if you like, before we can then recover the bass and have that come back in. So with these 2 filters working side by side, we might be able to produce some really interesting effects. Let's have a listen. So what I'm going to do is to start by creating a line here starting at 0. Remember, if the line is at 0, I can hear all of the frequency content for a high pass filter, all of the bass, all of the mid-range, and all of the treble. So what I can then do is to think, right, where do I want to start using a high pass filter? Well, what I'm actually going to do is to think, right, not only do I want this low pass filter to do what it's doing here at this particular point, I can see the shape in the background, I'm also going to introduce some high pass filtering at that point too. So exactly at the point where the low pass filter is recovering, the high pass filter starts to come in and have itself sort of influence the way that the tone of this track sounds as well. There's our low pass filter. Now that moment there's a really nice one, just exactly the moment that we feel like, okay, yeah, we can hear this shape is coming back into the downbeat at exactly that moment that we're expecting to hear all of that bass and all of that wash come back in, the full rush of the mix, if you like. What we've got then is the high pass filter saying, you know what, actually not yet. What I'm going to do is to scoop out the low frequency content just to produce this kind of moment before it then drops back down. And we can see the benefit of working with both of these filters at the same time. And because they've got their own cutoff frequencies, what we can then do, of course, is to create a completely unique shape per filter. So let's keep going and carve some other high pass filter moments into this track as well. So what we could do there would be to create this kind of nice little sort of disembodied effect here right at the end before maybe we have another drop section where everything comes sort of crunching back in. So we can see these 2 parameters side by side. We can see the low frequency content that we've sort of maintained, getting rid of high frequency content using our first low pass filter. And what we've got now is the opposite. We've got our high pass filter carving holes out of the bass end of our track. And whether we create filter sections that are unique to one filter, or whether or not we get the 2 working side by side, what we have a chance to do is just to control tone over the entire mix. And remember, that's been possible because we've put these effects on the output channel. So within this project, what we've done is to look at working with 2 separate filters on the output channel. One's a low pass filter and one is a high pass filter. And doing that, we're able to control the tone of the entire track on a moment by moment basis.